key is to just relax. Don't worry about the numbers. Don't worry about what the other guys are thinking. You're here for a reason. You believe that, right?
Say it.
I'm upset.
Say it so the whole band can hear you.
I'm upset.
Louder!
I'm upset.
Louder!
I'm upset.
Whiplash. This 2014 masterpiece is considered to be one of, if not the best films to come out that year. It is a simple yet deep story about a jazz drummer named Andrew Naiman and his teacher Terrence Fletcher. This film has great pacing, performances, editing, and obviously an amazing score. However, the reason why it's still talked about today is the alleged toxic relationship between the main character Fletcher and his student Naiman. Many claim the things Fletcher does to Naiman throughout Whiplash paint him as a psychopath. Those same people believe there isn't much to Fletcher's teaching methods other than being questionable at best and highly manipulative, even sadistic at worst. But today, I want to put these claims to rest for good. This will be an analysis of Terrence Fletcher and his style of teaching to prove that he is undeniably the ideal mentor. Some argue that Fletcher's toxic, abusive, even predatory behavior starts as early as the very first scene of the film, where we open to a slow dolly of Andrew Naiman, who is obviously extremely hardworking because he is playing alone late at night after everyone has gone. Director Damien Chazelle says in an interview that he shot Whiplash like a 70s thriller.
It started with the emotion, and then from there it just becomes about, well, how do you capture that? And so we shot it kind of like a thriller, and sort of, it was even plotted as a thriller, and it was very much sort of done in the style of certain 70s kind of paranoid kind of movies that I just personally love and adore.
So it wouldn't be far off to say that this dolly can be interpreted in Fletcher's perspective, prowling his prey. The shot that follows is the first time that we see Fletcher, who is a bald figure in the darkness, similarly to how the devil is portrayed in classic literature. This is very fitting symbolism, because Fletcher turns himself into the devil in order for the greater good. On top of that, jazz was often referred to as the devil's music. In this crucial opening scene, we find out that Fletcher is revered around the school, and immediately invokes fear into Naiman. We can see this by his instant apology when Fletcher enters the room.
I'm sorry.
Fletcher also belittles Naiman with what seems like a gotcha moment, followed by what seems to be pointless name calling.
Did I ask you to start playing again?
Sorry,
I asked why you stopped playing, and your version of an answer was to turn into a wind-up monkey.
It would be easy to hyper-focus on the toxic or predatory interaction and dismiss the scene as a display of just that. However, this is the wrong thing to take away from this scene. What is important to take away from this is that Fletcher is both helping strengthen and test Naiman's desire for greatness at the same time. Take a look at how Naiman goes into such a deeply focused state of mind. He gets into the zone, and he doesn't even notice Fletcher leaving the room. Basically, Fletcher helps Naiman's soul get in between the material world and that of the spirit world. So it is very impressive that Fletcher is able to get Naiman into this state of mind upon first meeting him, and then throughout the rest of the film. Fletcher understands Naiman and his unbridled drive for greatness at just one look at him, as opposed to Naiman's dad, who couldn't understand the potential for greatness even though it had been sitting next to him for 19 years, rightfully refusing to eat those foul Raisinets. All of Fletcher's actions towards Naiman from the opening scene all the way until the final competition scene are completely justifiable because of what both Naiman and Fletcher are both pursuing, which is greatness. Fletcher understands his students, and what he does for their success. Fletcher tells Naiman to be at practice at 6 a.m. sharp, and Naiman thinks he overslept and rushes over. This rushing is great foreshadowing to later in the scene. But Naiman finds out that band practice doesn't start until 9 a.m., so he waits there for 3 whole hours. At first glance, this may seem like Fletcher is merely trying to toy with Naiman, but this is one of the many trials and tribulations that Fletcher makes Naiman go through to test his drive for greatness. Also, he was trying to get Naaman to understand the importance of getting up early. To illustrate just how important getting up early is, let's take a look at scholar Jocko Willem, then so be it. Now, some claim that one piece of evidence of Fletcher's abusive behavior is calling Andrew Naaman Neiman, when he clearly said that his name was pronounced Naaman.
We got a squeaker today, people. Neiman.
Is this supposed to make Neiman look weak and defenseless? No, because Neiman doesn't need any help in that department at all. And nicknames are actually commonly used as terms of endearment. Take a look at some other examples of nicknames being used as terms of endearment, and just tell me I'm wrong.
Well, geez, Agnes, does the field hockey team know that you're missing? Listen, Supergirl. Okay, Janet.
Hey, Marty, calm down. Don't tell me to be calm, pony boy. Pony boy.
Film analysts say that Fletcher didn't have any good reason to kick this student out of his class. However, he did, because 1, he wanted to show Neiman that he didn't mess around, and because Fletcher has a no tolerance policy for obesity. According to the CDC, obesity rates are at an all-time high, coming in at above 40% in America. And in addition to the obvious negative health effects, studies have shown obesity actually makes you less smart. Fletcher was just trying to protect the quality of his band and improve the quality of America all at the same time. Fletcher is really just helping fight America's obesity crisis by kicking out one Mars bar eating fatty at a time. During this talk, Fletcher gives Andrew a false sense of security that Fletcher will exploit, and gathers important information that he uses to BTFO Neiman.
What about your mother? What does she do?
I don't know. She left when I was a baby.
And for anyone who's not familiar, BTFO basically just means blown the f out.
You are a worthless, friendless, little piece of shit whose mommy left daddy when she figured out he wasn't Eugene O'Neill, and who is now weeping and slobbering all over my drum set like a 9-year-old girl.
Fletcher builds Neiman up and then brings him crashing down within this scene. And this is a good thing that Fletcher did this, because let's be honest here, Neiman was
Russian.
Neiman rushed to class and on the drum kit later on. Rushing is terrible, because in both instances, it resulted in Neiman getting his face smacked.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2.
Fletcher was just trying to teach him a valuable lesson, that if you rush into things too fast, then you will end up getting hurt. Fletcher isn't sadistic or abusive, he is simply the business. As opposed to the ancient definition, the more modern definition of the business is as follows. A substitute phrase for words such as cool, tight, awesome, etc. Fletcher is the business, because even though he wears a fedora, he minimizes the time he wears it, clocking in at the shortest time a character has ever worn a fedora in cinematic history. He is a man of principle. He has a no tolerance policy for mouth-breathing, obese idiots. Many believe that the actions Fletcher takes in this scene would classify as bullying, and they're right. But I asked those same people, what exactly is wrong with bullying? Bullying is actually a very constructive tool that should be included in every teacher's arsenal, because bullying makes organisms stronger. This anonymous anthropology scholar had this to say about bullying. Bullying is natural amongst almost all pack animals. In any pack or society, a hierarchy will naturally form, and animals/people will seek to climb within that hierarchy. And to do so, it's necessary to keep others beneath them and make sure those people can't climb ahead of you. He backs up this claim with an article published by the BBC called "Why Bullying is Such a Successful Evolutionary Strategy." I'll leave a link in the description for anyone who's interested in reading the whole thing. This anonymous scholar goes on to say if you are perceived as weak and non-threatening, other people in the pack/society will use you as a stepping stone to climb within that hierarchy. This pertains to Neiman's situation in Whiplash perfectly, because before he met Fletcher, Andrew was weak and non-threatening. This is why he was second seat in the mediocre band and didn't have the courage to ask out his crush at the movie theater. Neiman was suffering from something called behavioral inertia, which I'm just going to let Vsauce explain.
Behavioral inertia is the tendency to keep doing what you're already doing. status quo bias. It can be a frustrating bias if you desire change.
Neiman was just going to continue his behavior as an average, mediocre, soy boy, incel art student not going anywhere, because that is exactly what he was used to. This behavior would have continued if not for a significant intervention from an outside force, aka Terrence Fletcher. Only after Fletcher came into Neiman's life, he became an alpha by asking out that girl,
Would you want to go out with me?
becoming much more assertive,
Yo, I'm in studio band because I'm the
Hey, why
best
don't
player.
you just back off?
Yo, f- off, Johnny Utah, turn my pages.
and no longer accepting mediocrity. The filmmaking even reflects this change in Andrew. Check out this graph that was recently published in an academic journal visual essay called Storyboardgraphy. These close-ups highlight that Neiman is much more confident in talking to women, because we can clearly see in these close-ups that instead of barely making eye contact with Nicole like he did in the previous scene, he is actually looking at her for more than a few seconds. Neiman no longer accepts being mediocre after starting to work with Fletcher. He decides that he doesn't want to be simply forgotten. And what's wrong with wanting to leave a legacy and only caring about yourself? Isn't that part of being American? Even Miles Teller says that there's nothing wrong with wanting to be great in this interview.
I was just really drawn to his drive and his ambition and his determination to become, one of the greats. And I don't think there's anything, wrong with kind of wanting to make a stamp, on this earth and to really kind of put your fingerprints all over something and have people, as he talks about it, talk about you kind of long after you're gone.
Andrew was lucky to have Fletcher, because he will probably die before he hits 30 as one of the most successful jazz drummers of the century, as opposed to wasting away as some Jewish loser who eats Raisinets out of the popcorn just like his father. There is no such thing as ever going too far to achieve greatness, because as a great man once said, you either die great or see yourself become the loser. Neiman actually had a learning disability in which he needed Fletcher to give him extra attention and accommodations as well. This disability is a pretty common one actually, and is usually found in those who go to expensive art universities. It is known as ADHD. It is quite a limiting disorder that makes it hard to focus on one's studies due to being unhappy with an iPhone a generation behind or a car with more than 20,000 miles on it. ADHD is one of the main things that contributes to Neiman demonstrating well below average behavior, such as this.
1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2.
Also, Fletcher wouldn't have had to be so hard on Neiman if he just smoked stogies, because stogies are scientifically proven to heighten focus, raise intelligence, and testosterone.
I can smoke stogies in my house, first of all, because her father introduced me to stogies, and second of all, because I'm a stud. I'm ballsy. I don't take no shit from anyone. I smoke my stogie anywhere I want. I don't have to find a hideout place like you.
Fletcher teaches Neiman something that is absent in many Zoomers today, and that is resilience and the importance of grit. People think of Fletcher as a villain, but he is actually the best thing to happen to our protagonist. He pushes people beyond what they're capable of by putting Neiman through the most amount of suffering imaginable. Like when Fletcher got him to get into that car accident, which gave him whiplash, hence the title of the movie. This whiplash was actually the best thing that could have happened to Andrew, because it made him increase the size of his neck twofold, turning him from turkey neck to beefy neck. His girlfriend Nicole couldn't handle his neck size anymore, so that was one of the hidden reasons why she actually was happy to leave Neiman, because she wasn't worthy. Every single scene where Neiman experiences suffering is caused by Fletcher, and that is the beauty of it. Fletcher isn't a psychopath for enjoying the suffering he's causing his students. He's actually just relishing in the fact that he's doing his job perfectly. The ideal mentor pushes their students to their absolute limits by providing the most pain and suffering imaginable. In order to explain this deeper, I ask you, please, to think about your time in high school and which teacher you learned from the most. For some of you, it might be Mr. Milquetoast pushover who gave out easy A's and was just a chill dude you could talk to at lunch sometimes. But for most of you, I guarantee the stuff that you remember from high school was taught to you by the stern ones. And you will definitely remember at least something they taught you. Like for me, I don't remember anything from my physics class senior year. And that could be that I'm retarded, or it could be because he didn't care if we came to class at all. But I sure remember exactly how the Boston Massacre happened from my 9th grade US history class, because the teacher used to be a criminal lawyer for 30 years, and he treated us like the delinquents we were. He wrote kids' names on the boards who were failing his class, so everybody in the class knew it. There are the teachers you'd get a beer with, and then there are the teachers you learn something from. And now, here are some great examples of amazing mentors in history. Dr. Sean McGuire from Good Will Hunting does a decent job of providing Will with suffering through boredom. However, his most successful point during his mentorship was in this scene, because he utilized both verbal and physical abuse at the same time.
If you ever disrespect my wife again, I will end you.
The ultimate example of an ideal mentor is Gandalf from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Gandalf, much like Fletcher, realized that he failed with his previous student Bilbo Baggins because he was too soft and the journey was way too enjoyable. He realized he had to be tougher on Frodo, so Gandalf put himself and all of Middle-earth in danger in order to make Frodo suffer and push him to his absolute limits. Gandalf purposefully didn't let Frodo in Lord of the Rings was actually Gandalf's master syllabus. Finally, Fletcher takes great inspiration from another great yet slightly flawed music mentor in history, and that is Dewey Finn from School of Rock. Dewey is a master at instilling verbal abuse.
Verbal abuse?
To better his students.
What's your name?
Freddie Jones.
Freddie Jones. Shut up!
Fletcher is also a master of verbal abuse, all thanks to Dewey paving the way.
Then why the didn't you say so?
Fletcher takes what he learned from Dewey to the next level by not only instilling a healthy amount of verbal abuse, but also adding physical abuse to provide max suffering. Some say that this was taking it a little bit too far, because Fletcher could have killed Neiman here, and we would never have gotten to see this great solo at the end. However, Fletcher did this knowing full well that Neiman would 100% dodge the chair when he threw it at his head. He did it because he knew Charlie Parker had a chair thrown at him, and Charlie Parker is good, so by that logic, it had to be a good idea. Dewey unfortunately had too much positive reinforcement in his methods in School of Rock. This excess of positive reinforcement led to Dewey's students failing, and one of them even going on to become a guitar thief when he got older. This is why Fletcher says,
"There are no two words in the English language more harmful than good job."
Maybe if Jack Black had thrown a chair at Freddie, then they would have actually won the Battle of the Bands in the School of Rock. Now, some might ask, is the bullying, name-calling, verbal abuse, physical abuse, and instituting max suffering worth it? In short, yes. Even if everything Fletcher did to Neiman somehow is proven immoral in the slightest, it doesn't make a difference because, well, it doesn't matter. Results are everything, and how you get there doesn't really matter at all. Fletcher tells Neiman that his band will be playing the studio setlist only to be embarrassed in front of hundreds of people. But in the end, it all works out for Neiman. Did Fletcher do it because he knew if he pushed Neiman just enough, he would play up to his full potential? Or does he just like watching people squirm? Thing is it doesn't make a difference because Neiman gives a truly amazing solo in the end. Fletcher knows that all that matters is that the finished product is great. It doesn't make a difference if the means to get that product is good or bad, moral or immoral. Think of Neiman's solo at the end as the iPhone you're using to watch this video. They're both great, and it doesn't matter how many child slaves had to suffer in order to get that great product. Because as the 19th century consequentialist philosopher Sergei Nechayev said, the end justifies the means. Basically meaning that if the goal is important enough, like being wicked cool, then any method of getting to that goal is not only acceptable, but justified. In the end, no Fletcher, no solo. No Fletcher, no greatness. It is really that simple. Thanks for watching.